The aroma of caramelized onions and seared meat filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint hum of the dishwasher. It was supposed to be a perfect evening, one I had planned down to the last detail. On the counter sat a box of 25 candles, waiting to crown the chocolate mousse cake I had made from scratch. My birthday, my big day. And yet, here I was, finishing the final touches on a meal that no one seemed to care about except me. From the dining room, I could hear the familiar cadence of my parents' voices, warm and proud, as they gushed about Sophie, my sister, the golden child. "Did you hear? Sophie's interview is tomorrow," Mom said, her voice carrying the kind of excitement she reserved for Sophie's milestones. "She's just so driven, isn't she?" "Riley, dinner almost ready?" Mom called, interrupting her own praise session. I gritted my teeth, ladling the glossy red wine reduction over the short ribs I'd spent hours perfecting. "5 more minutes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The sauce needed to be flawless. Every element of this dish had been tested, adjusted, and refined. I wanted tonight to be special, a rare chance for my family to see me, not as the chef, not as the second-best daughter, but as someone worth celebrating. Mason, my boyfriend, appeared at my side, setting a pristine white plate on the counter. "Need help carrying these out?" he asked, his voice soft and reassuring. "I've got it," I said quickly, my tone sharper than I intended. "Sorry," I added, glancing at him. "It's just, you know how they get." He squeezed my shoulder. "That's why I'm here. Moral support, court jester, whatever you need." I gave him a small smile, but before I could say more, Sophie breezed into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the tile. "Something smells burnt," she announced, wrinkling her nose in a way that was both casual and calculated. "It's not burnt," I said evenly. Her perfectly manicured fingers grazed the counter as she inspected the dishes. "Did you remember Dad's acid reflux? He can't handle spicy food anymore." "It's not spicy," I snapped, a little louder than I meant to. "I know how to cook for my own family." She smiled sweetly, but the edge in her tone was unmistakable. "Just looking out for everyone, like always." Mason gave me a knowing look, silently urging me to keep my cool. I took a deep breath, grabbing the plates and carrying them to the dining room one by one. As I arranged the dishes around the table, I noticed how Dad barely looked up from his phone, his fingers scrolling through emails or news or whatever it was that always seemed more important than being present. Mom, on the other hand, was fussing over Sophie's hair, asking if she'd picked out an outfit for her interview. The candles on the counter remained untouched, still in their box. "Before we eat," I said, standing beside my chair, "I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. This recipe is something I've been working on." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, already reaching for her fork. "Let's just eat while it's hot. Sophie needs her rest for tomorrow." I sank into my chair, the words dying in my throat. As they began to eat, I watched nervously, waiting for their reactions. The meat was fork tender, the sauce rich and balanced. It was, objectively, the best dish I'd ever made. Sophie picked up her knife and began sawing at her portion with exaggerated effort. "It's chewy," she declared, setting down her fork with a dramatic sigh. "And really salty. Did you taste this before serving?" Dad pushed his plate away. "It is rather tough. Maybe stick to simpler dishes next time, Riley." "That's impossible," I muttered, cutting into my own portion. The meat fell apart easily, just as it should. "Well, clearly something went wrong tonight," Sophie said, taking a long sip of water. "It happens to everyone, right? Not all of us can be professional chefs." I glanced at Mason, who had been eating quietly beside me. "Tell them," I said, my voice tight. He cleared his throat. "Actually, it's—" Before he could finish, Sophie suddenly grabbed her throat, her face contorting in apparent agony. "It burns," she gasped, clutching at her neck. Mom jumped up, panic etched across her face. "What's happening? Riley, what did you put in this?" "Nothing," I said, frozen in disbelief. "Call an ambulance," Dad shouted, already dialing. In the chaos that followed, I stood motionless, watching as Sophie's performance reached its crescendo. Her trembling hands, the tears streaming down her face. It was Oscar-worthy. But when our eyes met across the table, I caught it, the flash of triumph in her expression. Later, as the house emptied and the chaos subsided, I found an empty bottle of hot sauce buried in the kitchen trash. Sophie's favorite brand, the kind that could make grown men cry. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about my birthday dinner. It was about keeping me in my place. Well, if Sophie wanted to play games, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. Because I wasn't just a chef. I was a creator. And I was about to serve up something she'd never forget. The morning after my ill-fated birthday dinner, I found myself staring at my phone, a fresh text from Mom glowing on the screen. Mom, we need to talk. Family meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Family meeting. Those two words always sent a chill down my spine. Family meetings weren't about resolving anything. They were Sophie's stage, a platform where her grievances became gospel, and my faults were dissected under fluorescent lighting. I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter where I'd made the short ribs less than 24 hours ago. The empty bottle of hot sauce was still in the trash, taunting me. Rough morning? Mason asked as he walked in, coffee in hand. Mom wants a family meeting tonight, I muttered. He frowned. Let me guess. Sophie's going to make it about her interview drama. Probably. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling under the surface. I'm not in the mood to sit there and pretend last night didn't happen. She sabotaged me, Mason. I saw the look on her face. She knew exactly what she was doing. He leaned against the counter, his expression softening. So don't pretend. Call her out on it. I shook my head. You know how that'll go. I'll be the bad guy, like always. Still, his words stuck with me as I arrived at my parents' house that evening. Mom was already setting up snacks in the living room, arranging everything just so, as if this were a casual get-together and not an ambush. Dad sat in his recliner, scrolling on his phone. And Sophie, of course, was sprawled on the couch, looking like she'd just walked off the set of a fashion shoot. Riley, Mum said, barely glancing up. We were just talking about last night. I bit back a sigh. What about it? Well. She exchanged a look with Sophie, who perked up, clearly ready to take the reins. I think we all noticed you've been stressed, Sophie began, her tone dripping with fake concern. And I just wanted to bring it up because we're worried about you. My stomach tightened. Worried about me? Sophie nodded, her eyes wide and innocent. Yes. Last night's dinner. It just felt like you were trying too hard. You're taking on too much, Riley. Maybe it's time to reassess your priorities. Reassess my priorities, I repeated, my voice rising. Mom stepped in quickly, her tone placating. Honey, we know you're ambitious, but Sophie's right. You've been working so hard at the restaurant, and it's starting to show. Oh, so now working hard is a bad thing, I snapped. Don't get defensive, Dad said without looking up from his phone. We're just saying you don't need to prove yourself all the time. You should focus on what really matters, like family. I clenched my fists, the words like a slap in the face. Family. That was rich, coming from people who only seemed to care about me when it was convenient. What about Sophie? I shot back, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Does she need to reassess her priorities too, or is this just about me? Sophie gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. Why are you attacking me? I'm trying to help you. Help me? I let out a humorless laugh. Like you helped me last night. Don't think I didn't see the hot sauce in the trash, Sophie. The room fell silent. Mom and Dad stared at me like I'd just accused her of murder. Sophie's shocked expression quickly morphed into righteous indignation. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. Of course you don't, I muttered, standing up. Because nothing is ever your fault, right, Sophie? You can waltz into the kitchen, ruin my food, fake an allergic reaction, and everyone still treats you like the victim. Riley! Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. That's enough. Apologize to your sister. No, I said, my voice firm. I'm done apologizing. I'm done pretending this family is anything but a Sophie appreciation club. Mom's face fell, her lips pressing into a thin line. If you walk out now, Riley, don't expect us to wait around when you realize how much you've hurt this family. I stared at her, feeling the weight of years of frustration, resentment, and exhaustion pressing down on me. You know what? I don't expect anything from you anymore. I grabbed my bag and walked out, the sound of Sophie's exaggerated sobs fading behind me. Mason was waiting in the car, his face a mix of concern and pride. How'd it go? I sank into the seat, letting out a shaky breath. I think I just burned the last bridge with them. Good, he said simply. Maybe it's time to build your own. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house, the lights glowing warmly in the windows. For once, I didn't feel guilty about leaving. If they wanted to pick sides, so be it. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I stood frozen in the doorway of my apartment, my eyes scanning the bold letters on the eviction notice taped to the door. Payment overdue. 3 months. My heart dropped, the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. How? I'd paid the rent every month on time. Mason, I called out, my voice shaking. Did you see this? He walked over, his face darkening as he read the notice. That's impossible. I know you paid it. I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through my bank app until I found the payments. Every one of them cleared. Confusion turned to dread as I noticed something odd. Large withdrawals I hadn't authorized. My stomach churned. Wait, I whispered, my voice barely audible. These withdrawals, they're from my joint account with my parents. Mason's jaw tightened. You still have a joint account with them? I never closed it. I didn't think. My voice trailed off as the realization hit me like a freight train. I dialed my mother's number, my hands trembling. She picked up on the first ring, her tone unnervingly casual. Hi, sweetheart. Is everything okay? Mom, I said, barely holding it together. Why are there thousands of dollars missing from my account? There was a pause. Too long. Oh, Riley, we were going to tell you. It's for Sophie's interview in New York. She needed help with travel expenses, and you know how tight things have been since your father's hours were cut. I cut her off, my voice rising. You took my money without asking me. It's not just your money, she snapped. We're a family, Riley. We support each other. No, we don't, I shot back. We support Sophie. Always Sophie. I've worked my ass off to build something for myself, and you just... My voice broke as tears threatened to spill. You just take it like it doesn't even matter. Don't be dramatic, she said, her tone icy now. You're doing fine. Sophie needed it more. That's not your call to make, I screamed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm being evicted, Mom. Evicted? I've lost everything, because you can't say no to her. Silence. Then quietly she said, Riley, you've always been so independent. We thought you'd understand. I hung up, my hands shaking. Mason reached for me, but I pulled away, pacing the room as a cocktail of anger, heartbreak, and betrayal coursed through me. They didn't even care, I whispered. They don't care about me at all. Mason's voice was firm. So stop letting them. Close the account. Cut them off. I turned to him, my jaw clenched. No, it's not enough. They've taken from me my whole life, time, money, respect, and I've let them, but not anymore. The next morning, I marched into the bank and closed the joint account, draining the remaining balance into my personal account. I spent the rest of the day gathering every document I needed to prove the unauthorized withdrawals. But the real showdown came that evening. I showed up unannounced at my parents' house, my heart pounding as I pushed open the front door. They were all there, Mom, Dad, and Sophie, sitting around the table like it was any other night. Riley, Mom said, startled. What are you doing here? I dropped a stack of printed bank statements onto the table. Explain this. Sophie's eyes widened, but she quickly masked it with a coy smile. Riley, It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I laughed bitterly. You stole from me, Sophie. Both of you. You stole from me to fund her life, and now I'm losing mine. Don't be ridiculous, Dad said, his voice stern. We're family. That money was for all of us. No, I said, my voice shaking with rage. It was mine, and I'm done being your doormat. I've already closed the account and reported the theft. The bank will be in touch. Mom's face paled. Riley, you wouldn't. Oh, I would, I said, my voice steady now, because this isn't just about money. It's about respect, something you've never given me. Riley, please, Sophie said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Let's not make this a bigger deal than it is. I turned to her, my eyes blazing. You've taken enough from me, Sophie, but this is the last thing you'll ever take. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that house for the last time, slamming the door behind me. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Mason was waiting in the car. I slid into the passenger seat, exhaling deeply. How'd it go? He asked. I looked at him, a small smile forming on my lips. I just burned the bridge. And how do you feel? Free, I said simply. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally in control of my own story, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. The text messages came first. Mom, how could you humiliate us like that? Family is about sacrifice, Riley. You'll regret this. Dad, you've blown this way out of proportion. Grow up and take some responsibility for your actions. And then Sophie, of course. Her words dripped with the kind of false concern that only she could master. Sophie, I hope you're happy, Riley. Mom's been crying all night. You've really hurt her, but I guess you don't care about anyone but yourself. I stared at the messages, my hands trembling, with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. Part of me wanted to fire back, to list every betrayal, every moment of neglect, every time they had put Sophie's needs above mine. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They weren't listening, had never listened, and I was done screaming into the void. Mason found me sitting on the couch, my phone still in my hand. He didn't say anything, just handed me a mug of tea and sat down beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. What are they saying now? He asked gently. The usual, I said, setting the phone down with a sigh. That I'm selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. Take your pick. He reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. And how do you feel? I hesitated, the answer tangled up in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Angry, I admitted, hurt, but mostly relieved. It was true. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe, like I wasn't suffocating under the weight of their expectations and constant criticism. The relief didn't last long. The next day, Mom showed up at my apartment, uninvited. I opened the door to find her standing there, her face pale and tight, with barely concealed anger. She clutched her purse like it was a lifeline, her eyes scanning the space behind me, as if she expected to find Sophie waiting to defend her. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside, letting her in, but kept my arms crossed as she took a seat at the kitchen table. Your father and I are very upset, she began, her voice clipped. You've put us in an impossible position, Riley. Reporting the account, threatening legal action. Do you have any idea what that could do to our family? Our family, I said, my voice sharp. You mean the family you've spent my entire life prioritizing Sophie over me? The family that had no problem stealing from me to fund her life. Mom flinched, but her expression quickly hardened. That money was for all of us, Riley. For Sophie's future. She's been through so much. And I haven't, I interrupted, my voice rising. I've worked for everything I have, Mom. Everything. And you took it like it was nothing. Do you even realize what you've done? I'm being evicted. I've lost my apartment, my stability, my sense of security. But sure, let's talk about Sophie and all she's been through. You don't understand, she said, her voice wavering now. We didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. You just never chose me. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. I'm done, Mom, I said, stepping back and folding my arms. I'm done with all of this. You can keep Sophie, and you can keep your excuses, but I'm not going to be part of a family that treats me like I don't matter. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel guilty. Not this time. After she left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, the weight of what I'd just done settling over me. There was no going back now. I spent the next few weeks putting my life back together. Mason helped me find a new apartment, a cozy little one-bedroom with sunlight streaming through the windows. I started fresh, throwing myself into work and focusing on the things I could control. The texts from my family slowed, eventually stopping altogether. I didn't reach out. Neither did they. Some nights, when the silence felt too loud, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Cutting ties with your family isn't something you do lightly, and the scars it leaves aren't easy to ignore. But then I'd think about all the years I spent trying to earn their love, bending over backward to meet expectations that only ever moved further out of reach. I wasn't doing that anymore. One night, Mason and I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, a bottle of wine between us. He raised his glass, a small smile playing on his lips. To starting over, he said. I clinked my glass against his, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Starting over, I echoed. For the first time, the words didn't feel like a loss. They felt like freedom. The sunlight streamed through the large windows of my new apartment, spilling golden warmth across the cozy living room. Mason sat on the couch, balancing a laptop on his knees, while I worked at the kitchen table, flipping through a thick planner filled with tabs and colorful notes, my wedding binder. I glanced up, catching him smiling at me. What? I asked, narrowing my eyes playfully. Nothing, he said, shaking his head. You just look happy. It suits you. I felt a genuine smile tug at my lips. He was right. I was happy. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by the pressure of meeting someone else's expectations. I was planning my wedding the way I wanted, with people who genuinely cared about me by my side. No compromises, no constant fear of disappointing someone. I flipped another page in the binder, my gaze lingering on the guest list. The names were fewer than I had once imagined, and the space where Mom and Dad might have been remained blank. It wasn't an easy choice leaving them out, but it was the right one. After everything, I finally realized I deserved to be surrounded by people who celebrated me, not tolerated me. Still, I couldn't deny the small ache in my chest. Cutting ties with my family had left a void I wasn't sure how to fill, but the ache wasn't as sharp as it had once been. It was dull now, fading with each passing day as I poured my energy into building something new, a life that was entirely mine. One afternoon, about a month before the wedding, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably my mother's, though shakier than I remembered. My heart clenched as I stared at it, debating whether to open it or toss it into the trash. Mason walked in, immediately noticing the envelope in my hands. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. Do you want me to open it for you? He offered. I shook my head. No, I need to do this myself. I sat down and carefully peeled the envelope open, pulling out a folded piece of paper. The letter was short, uncharacteristically so for my mother. Dear Riley, I know I've failed you in more ways than I can count. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what happened, and I can't pretend to justify it. You were right to call us out. You were right to walk away. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret everything. Every time I made you feel less than. Every time I didn't protect you the way a mother should. If you'll let me, I'd like to start over. If not, I'll respect that too. You deserve peace, Riley, even if it's without us. Love. Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I set the letter down. I didn't know what to make of it, whether it was sincere or just another attempt to pull me back into the fold. What does it say? Mason asked gently. She's apologizing, I said, my voice trembling, for everything. She wants to start over. And how do you feel about that? I looked out the window, the city skyline glowing in the late afternoon light. I thought about all the hurt, the betrayal, the years of being treated like an afterthought. But I also thought about the person I'd become, the strength I'd found in walking away. I don't know, I admitted, but I think I'm willing to see where it goes, on my terms. And that's what I did. Slowly, cautiously, I opened the door to a new kind of relationship with my mother. It wasn't perfect. There were still scars, still moments of doubt, but it was a start. On my wedding day, as I stood in the mirror adjusting the delicate lace on my dress, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Mom wasn't there, but Mason was. My closest friends were. My new family, the one I had chosen, filled the room with love and laughter. As I walked down the aisle, the sunlight casting a warm glow over everything, I felt nothing but joy. The weight of the past was gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life I had built with my own hands. If I had learned anything from this journey, it was that self-respect wasn't something you earned by proving yourself to others. It was something you claimed by standing firm in your worth. And as Mason took my hand, his smile as bright as the day itself, I knew I had finally found mine. This was the start of something beautiful, something real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was starting over. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.